All right. So my trend, as reported to the fine people who set this up, was open hardware. And I decided that in order to get to open hardware, I needed to talk a little bit about hardware in general. I think most libraries are fairly comfortable talking about software at this point, especially like open source software. Lots of libraries use some variety of open source software in their daily kind of, endeavors, whether that's WordPress or Drupal or, something that runs the connectors on their website. So there's lots of open source things out there that libraries are using, but we're not as familiar with open hardware. And I wanted to just set a stage as to why I think that's actually something that we should be paying attention to. Hardware is something that is very, very predictable in its growth and how it gets better. There are two laws, actually, and they've pretty much been true for years and years, about the engineering of computers, of computer hardware, and those are Moore's Law and Kuhme's Law. Moore's Law says that every 18 months, what a chip can do, the amount of processes that a computer chip can handle doubles every 18 months. So every 18 months, your chips get twice as fast, right? And Kuhme's law said, and at the same time they get twice as fast, they get half as expensive to manufacture. So you get every 18 months a doubling of speed and a halving of price, like clockwork, and that's been true since the 70s, since the 60s. The other law is Kuhme's law, and that says that at a fixed computing load, when a chip is doing something, the amount of energy you need to do that halves every 18 months. Those are both completely steady laws. They're basic engineering laws that anyone who does computer design understands and knows. But it isn't always kind of tangible because we're not living in 18-month chunks. We're living day to day, and we're seeing the new cell phone get released every week, right? And it's marginally better than the one we have in our hand, but it's not remarkably better than the one we have in our hand. And so in 2 years, we'll upgrade and it'll be a lot better. But we don't kind of see this longitudinal growth of the hardware over time. And it's a common kind of thing when you're talking about hardware to say things like, so the phone that I'm holding, right, has more processing power in it than all of the computers in the world when we went to the moon, right? That's true. What we don't often think about is that that also means that in 20 years, the thing that I'm holding in my hand, whether it's shaped like a phone or not, or whether it's implanted in my arm, whatever that thing is that I'm dealing with, is going to be more powerful than all of the computers that are on the planet right now, right? So if you think about the things that are going on with Deep Blue and Watson and some of the massive supercomputers on the planet, the thing that you can afford and hold will be more powerful than all of those put together in 20 years. Okay? That's what Moore's Law and Kuhme's Law mean. It also means that because it gets more and more and more powerful, the average kind of baseline of technology, the cost of it for hardware, goes down and down and down. Personal computing hardware, gadgets, it's the only consumer good that gets cheaper and better over time. Every other consumer good gets cheaper and worse or better and more expensive. But electronics, all the time, forever and ever, will get cheaper and better, okay? So when you kind of wrap all of those things up, you get a ubiquity of amazing hardware that is going to overwhelm us. The sensors that these things contain are getting smaller and smaller and cheaper. I'm wearing one on my wrist, right? This is a pedometer, a digital pedometer. How many people in here are wearing a Fitbit, measuring their steps around, right? So little digital pedometers. These things would have been, you couldn't have afforded one 10 years ago to do what this thing does. And now it's incredibly cheap. And it's measuring everything I do. It's measuring where I walk around. It's measuring how I sleep at night. It's measuring all sorts of things. The growth of this sort of hardware and the proprietary nature of it, right? So those of you with Fitbits, you connect to the Fitbit website and it updates your Fitbit information. You can share that data a little bit, but you don't have control over that data in the way that you might if the hardware platform that you were dealing with was completely open. It took us decades to realize that the benefit of open software was that we could control it, right? And I think that there is some degree to which over the next several years we are going to start deciding that at least at some level open hardware is going to give us the ability to control certain aspects of the computing experience we put in front of people that we may not now quite realize. Primary among those is the amount of data that leaks in a privacy sense from the hardware that we use and from the hardware that our customers, patrons are using. Some of you have probably seen the news about the latest Facebook emotion experiment data. Facebook, this was just a paper was just released, if you haven't seen the story, that Facebook basically decided to screw with their customers and manipulate their news feeds in order to give their news feeds either positively emotionally charged stories or negatively emotionally charged stories. So they manipulated the feeds you were reading, all of you out there, and then they tracked how you updated your own feed and whether you updated your own feed positively or negatively using semantic analysis of the posts, right? And what they discovered was, no big surprise, if you feed people bad news, they will report more bad news and feel bad about it. And if you report good news, then people will feel good and report more good things, right? There's kind of a social, emotional thing going on there. Well, the more data we leak and the more the hardware we have is closed to us to understand what the data is that we're leaking, the more that sort of slightly creepy use of our data I think is going to kind of rise to the surface. So the privacy thing underlies it, but I think that open hardware is going to be something that we're going to need to take a look at over the next 5 years or so.